Hi, this is Tony again, and we're back on the bench. And this evening, we've got a Penn 309 level wind that we're going to be digging into here. And this is a very used reel. Obviously, it's got lots of cosmetic damage here, mostly to the spool, and as well as the post frames and whatnot. Looks like the line guide is not seated in that slot anymore, which is a common problem with these reels. So there's a number of problems, but we're going to be getting into the take apart and then the cleaning, which I'm going to do in a separate video, the cleaning of these parts and components, which goes the same for all parts and components on, I'd say, the majority of the Penn reels in general, just doing the polishing and the cleaning. So that'll be in a separate video, and we'll be reassembling, of course, and getting this ready to go back out and do some fishing. So and also, just to clarify, the Penn Pier 309 is the same reel as this. They're different generations. Penn came out with this line in 1966, and it's still made to the present. Only difference is the present day reels are made in China, whereas this one and the Penn Pier are made in the USA. So we're gonna get into this here and start getting this piece apart. But this is a great reel. The Penn Pier that I just showed, I've had for quite a few years actually, and it's a solid reel. Great for trolling, great for bottom fishing. Not really the best casting reel, but outside of that, it definitely serves some good purpose, mainly for saltwater fishing. It has a 3-to-1 gear ratio. This does have a larger gear set in opposed to the 209. They called the Penn Pier version the Super Pier. So I got that piece off real easily, but you can see how dirty this is. And, you know, we're going to do a little inspection here as well. We're going to kind of inspect these teeth. The teeth look like they're intact and they're okay, but there's definitely a cleaning that needs to start happening with this. So we're gonna see if we can get this ring off here. Sometimes you just take a little screwdriver or a razor blade and get that in there so you can start prying this off the ring there. But I'm just going to be throwing all these parts and pieces into the container here basically, and we're going to start hosing all these pieces off. You see this wheel just came out. All that's going to soak in there, and then we can start taking off all of these pieces as well. And I'm just going to keep these in here for the time being. But spool comes out real easily. You can see we got some rust damage and stuff like that, so we're definitely going to be soaking that up. And then we've got all the business end right here, and I mean, it doesn't look bad. It's definitely in need of a cleaning though. So we'll take all of our frame posts off. And I'm going to separate these screws because I like to keep those separated the best that I can. But what we're probably going to do is we're gonna soak all this stuff in some WD-40, probably overnight, and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll start getting into all the cleaning part of it. As you can see, there's not too much magic into disassembling this reel. You can have this apart pretty darn quickly. There we go. Okay. And then we'll get our handle off here. Handle screw. handle nut off. Hopefully it comes off easily. It does, so that's a good sign. I don't know the history of this reel. It was brought to me by a coworker friend that decided he didn't want it anymore. So I figured I'll work on it and get it ready to do some fishing again someday. Okay, so now we've got 4 screws to take our bridge assembly out, and we'll get to that, and I'm probably going to get another little tray going here just to put these little pieces and parts in. And note that that screw is a partially threaded screw, as well as the other one opposite from it on the top. That's pretty standard for most of the Penn reels of this generation. But the fact that this reel, as well as the 209, are still in production is really saying something about just the way that the operation of the reel. It's a very popular reel, both the 309 and the 209. Okay, so now you just want to be careful when you take this out, because there is a dog spring in there, like a lot of these old Penn reels, and you just want to make sure that that doesn't go flying out on you. But we've got the dog and all these other pieces hanging out in here. There's that little dog spring too. It's hard to see, but it's right there. Really, really small. We'll keep that in there. And then we just got to get our eccentric jack out and our pinion yoke and all these other little pieces and parts here. There's a couple of springs. And then we just need to get this ring off in order to get our bridge assembly off. And we'll dump that in there, as well as all of that. And we'll clean all this up real good. And then we've got our bridge with our gear set and our clutch kit. So we're gonna take all these pieces and parts out here. And we've got a fiber washer. So I'm just gonna dump all those pieces in there, and we'll take the drag kit out. Hopefully this is all salvageable. It's pretty soaked in grease, but I think we can clean it up pretty good and reuse it. The goal with this particular reel is to use all the existing parts and to not have to replace too much, hopefully. That's what we're shooting for. So we're just going to set all these washers aside here for now. And in the meantime, we're just going to resort to some good old WD-40 on this stuff and hose it down real good. Make sure we get all these parts kind of soaked in here real good, and let that WD-40 work its way in there. This is part of, you know, working on these old reels. If you're restoring and trying to clean them up the best you can, this is the time-consuming part. So it's definitely worth it if you want smooth operating mechanics, or if you just want things to look clean. But then again, sometimes you just want to do a light cleaning, and you know, like a lubing basically. And in this case, this just really needs to be taken apart and serviced. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this soak overnight, and then we're going to be back when it's penetrated some of the corrosion and the pitting and the rust and whatnot, and we'll do that separate video on the cleaning and the polishing of all these pieces. And we'll be back. Okay, so we're back, and it's the next evening actually, and we have a bunch of these pieces and parts here all cleaned up, and with the help of some steel wool, some Scotch pads, some rubbing compound, things like that. A lot of these chrome pieces they've cleaned up quite nicely. If you want to see the process involved in that, I've got a separate video on the detailing and cleaning of chrome pieces for these kinds of reels. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted to get just the bulk of everything done, just to be able to assemble the reel back together without diving into too much of that, because it is rather time consuming. So we've got some pieces in here that are still soaking, and we're going to take them out and we're going to kind of dry them off a little bit from the WD-40. But as you can see, WD-40 definitely holds its place in doing this kind of work. We're definitely going to take a Q-tip though to the inside. In here you can just see all that built up grease in there that we definitely want to get out. But it's nice and loose at least, so we can easily get to it. But yeah, this reel is actually cleaning up fairly well, and it's definitely going to have a lot of fishing use left in it, I think. And like I've mentioned before, the level wind series is a great line that Penn's been making for quite a long time now, actually. When they started making the earlier models, like the number 9 Peerless to the 109 Junior to the 209 Senior. Eventually that evolved into the Penn Pier 209, and then eventually the Super Pier, which is this model. But eventually they just got away from the Penn Pier name and just turned it into level wind. So definitely been around for a while, the technology, and it's still made today, this reel. Okay, so that's cleaning up relatively well. I think the only other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to just spray this down with a little bit of degreaser and take a toothbrush and just kind of scrub around in there a little bit, just to clean it up the best that we can. And this is just a mild degreaser right here that we're using, nothing fancy. Okay, so that's not too bad. Put that off to the side and we'll get into the other plate here. But all these parts and components are looking not too shabby. Once again, we'll just hose this down with a little bit of mild degreaser. Take our toothbrush, check the teeth on this wheel right here. It looks like everything is okay there. It is a common problem with these level wind reels because this is a plastic wheel, for them to crack over time. So that's definitely something that you want to look out for if you're working on one of these. Okay. And then the rest of these parts are just some of the smaller pieces, like the bridge and the bridge sleeve. And we're going to take that off and inspect the shaft in there, make sure that's okay. And then we got our main gear, of course. Main gear doesn't look too bad. It's a little dirty. We'll clean that up, as well as all these other little parts and components here. But as you can see, it does turn into kind of a dirty job, so don't be surprised if you run into that and you're working on some of these old vintage reels. It's just part of the process. Okay, so we're going to get our tray out of the way with our WD-40 and our degreaser. And what I'm probably going to do here real quick is I'm just going to rinse off these pieces here real quick, and just to get any other little contaminants out of there. I think overall they're in pretty good shape, but I'm just going to do that off camera real quick. Okay, so these cleaned up real nicely and they're ready to go. So we're just going to put those off to the side now, and we're going to get into some of these other little parts and pieces right here real quick. So in order to get this bridge out, you have to be able to hit this little pin that's in there. And what I like to do is I like to put this on a vise that I have off camera right here, and I'll just do that with a small hammer. But this is definitely an important component to inspect when you're working on these old reels, and it can be overlooked actually quite frequently. Sometimes it can be a little tricky if you're not used to doing it, but just got to get it in a good position where it's not going to move too much. Okay. So you can see the pin is sticking out there just ever so slightly, and then you should be able to take like a pair of needle nose and pull that pin out. You just want to make sure that you don't mung it up too much in the process. This one's actually being a little on the stubborn side. There we go. Okay, so you can see it's a real tiny little pin, but you want to pull that out so that you can get access to this part of the main shaft, the bridge shaft. You want to clean that up real good, and then I like to take the steel wool to this. Clean that up real good, like so. And then I've seen some people use grease on this. I've also seen people use oil. I like to stick with the oil myself, but it's not that there's one way that's right over the other. I think it's kind of a matter of preference. But I've had pretty good results with the oil. And another thing that we want to do before we button this back up is we want to clean this in here. You can see how dirty this is. You really want to get all those old contaminants out. It's really important that you do that. If you're going to go through all this trouble, you might as well get all of that cleaned up. And then we'll just hit this with the steel wool just to clean that up. Okay, so we'll put that back into place. That's spinning real nicely, and then we need to put our pin back in, of course. And you want to make sure that this pin is seated all the way in, and it clears this thread in here, because otherwise you're going to have a hard time getting the main gear on. Okay, so now I also like to take a little toothbrush here and clean these threads. I can see that they're pretty dirty with a lot of old grease and oil, so we'll clean that up, and it looks pretty good. Now we've got all these other parts and pieces here to clean up, and what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of the same treatment here with this, and take our toothbrush and clean out all these grooves. These are the parts in the video that I really wanted to show and kind of walk through, and not spend so much time showing you how to clean all the chrome pieces, because in a lot of situations you don't need to do all that much cleaning, depending on the shape of the reel. So main gear looks real good, I think. Just got a little bit of contaminant in there, but not too bad. Now don't forget, you've got a fiber washer right here that also needs to be cleaned off. We are going to try to reuse this washer kit. Even though it is considerably dirty, we're going to try to clean it up the best we can. But your fiber washer is going to go in place like so, and then your main gear is going to go back on. And then we've got the rest of our drag stack, and so we've got a spring washer, a metal washer, fiber washer, keyed washer, fiber washer, metal washer, and fiber washer. And these pieces just basically need to be wiped down and cleaned off. So this is an HT100 kit made by Penn. I'm just going to move some of these pieces up here so that you can see these a little better on camera. But it's a HT100 kit, standard for these reels, and you know, it doesn't look that bad actually. It doesn't look like it was used too much actually, so that's a good thing. I don't see any signs of rust or corrosion on these metal washers, so that's always a good thing. But definitely got greased up a little bit too much, but that happens. Okay, so now we're gonna deploy some of our Cal's star drag grease on these washers here. And I just like to, you can do a number of different things with this, a brush or a little Q-tip, and just put a light film of star drag grease on there, very, very light. Put that into place, and then you got your metal washer. I don't find that there's really any need to put the grease on the metal washers. It just really needs to be on those fiber washers, essentially. Like so. Put a little bit more. Very, very light film of this stuff. It doesn't need to be very, very thick at all, but you want to get both sides, like so. And this helps protect these washers and makes them last longer, keeps them flexible, and that's what you want when you're working with this kind of a drag kit. Got another metal washer on top to complete the stack, and then you've got your spring washer to top that part off, and that's it. We'll put this off to the side, and now we can add a little bit of blue grease, a little bit of Penn Precision grease to our main gear, which I like to do. Put a little bit of that on there. You don't need to get carried away. Just want to hit enough of the teeth with a little bit of that. Okay, that should be good for that. So that's your assembled drag stack and the bridge assembly with the main gear all put together. So now we're going to put that up here. We're just going to get all these other little pieces and parts out here. So we've got our side plate bearing and our pinion gear and all these other little pieces right here, and we basically just need to clean these off now that they've been soaking in some WD-40 for a while. And you can just see all the contaminants in here. It's just loaded with all that junk in there. So just kind of sort these pieces out the best that we can. But I like to take a toothbrush to the pinion gear, definitely, and get all those old contaminants out of there the best that we can. Clean that up real nice. Clean the inside. You can see how dirty that is. Get all those contaminants out of there. And then we've got all these bits and pieces right here. Got our pinion yoke. And we got our dog, of course. We got a dog spring here. Got our eccentric jack lever. And all these pieces are in pretty decent shape, I'd say. And then we got our bridge screws, of course. Okay, so now we're at the part where we're ready to start assembling this side of the reel, the handle side as we call it. So we're going to start with a few different components here. we have these springs that need to go back into position, of course. And then we have our pinion yoke, and what I like to do here is I like to start deploying some grease here, some blue grease on this right out the gate. And then you can kind of stack on a little bit more grease on here. Not too much, but just enough. I like to just kind of get it just in general all the way around on there. Okay, and then also get a little dab of it here on the bushing, as well as on the eccentric lever up here, the spring, get a little bit in there. And those are pretty much the important points to hit, as well as the level wind bushing that's right here as well, and that should definitely get a little bit of grease in that department there. So now you can put this piece into position like so. Hold that there. And then we got our eccentric jack, of course, that goes over the top. This is where it gets a little tricky, but with a little bit of maneuvering it can be done. And then I like to top this off with a little bit more blue grease in this quadrant here, as well as a little bit here and here. And you'll see why once we get the rest of this in position and put together. Okay, so now we're ready to put our drag stack and our bridge assembly back into position ever so gently. And I like to just hold it in place like so, so that you get that sync happening right there. And then you need to push down on this pinion assembly, and you need to start rolling the bridge around slowly. Now you need to stop here, because now what you need to do is you need to put your dog back into position so that it's ready to accept these teeth here. And then this is where it gets even trickier, and you need to, I like to put a little bead of oil on these bridge screws, and then we're going to put one of the fully threaded screws down low to catch that dog, to keep it from moving. And then we've got our little itty bitty dog spring, and you have to be able to get this in position, and you don't want this to go flying out on you. So you need to just tuck it down in there ever so gently, and then you can roll the bridge back around. Again, this is the tricky part, but practice makes better with this. Once you hear that little click, that's usually a very good sign, and you should be able to start turning this screw back in, like so, like that. And then once we'll back it off just a tiny little hair, but we'll get the rest of these screws put into position and start turning those, and it should line up the bridge perfectly the way it needs to be. Like a lot of these Penn reels, this assembly is very, very similar, so if you've done one, you can do a good portion of them. A lot of the newer ones are a little bit more sophisticated, of course, but any of these reels from this generation are definitely going to be this way. We're going to make sure that this is working right. It still feels pretty stiff to me, so we're just going to back off these screws a turn here, and we're going to see what we need to make happen to make this right. All right, so that's right there. So now we'll snug these up again. There we go. Yeah, that's good. Just the way it should be. Okay. Nice, good dog. Click on there is what you want. Okay, so now we're ready to put the ring back into position on this side, which I believe is this one right here. So these rings came out really nice, very, very shiny, and that's always the goal that you want to shoot for. So that side is pretty much ready to go. So now what I like to do is start assembling the frame posts and basically get anything else attached to this that I can. So we've got two standard posts, and then we've got the level line post that has this trough in it, basically, that the level line guide seats into. And then of course you've got the stand. So we're going to put all those pieces and parts on. Take these screws out here, and note that you've got two shorter screws, and keep them separate from the frame post screws. And we're just going to do a little dab of oil on all of these here. So I like to start with the stand. I like to just get one of those screws started in there. And this can be a little tricky too. Sometimes you kind of have to balance this out a little bit, but once you get the stand mounted on there, then the rest of it kind of comes together fairly easily. Put the other side in here. Obviously, having good alignment is kind of the key to this. You have to hold it down with one hand in position and keep it flat, and that's what it takes, and that's fine. Just take your time with it, don't rush it. And if it ever feels like the screw just doesn't want to turn quite right, it more than likely will not. So don't try to force it, because you'll wind up cross-threading it, and you'll have to get new screws or find a parts reel or something like that. So, okay. Okay. So that part's good there. Now we can put on our frame posts. And we have one that goes here, here, and here. And you just have to make sure that you have the right ones in the right positions. You need to have this one on the top right here. And so we'll start on the outside one here, or inside I should say, the one that's closest to you when you're fishing. Snug this up. That's all good there. We'll do our line guide post. Now note that you have to have that trough facing downward, and what I'll normally do is I'll snug it up a little bit, but then I'll back it off a turn, because you are going to more than likely need to make an adjustment with that. So we'll get to that a little later once we're ready for it. And then I'll put on this other post here, spin that on like so. Okay, so it's starting to come together, which is good. Now we've got a few other little pieces and parts here to put on. So we've got our our shield here, the worm drive shield, and this needs to go back into position, and it can really only go one way, so you need to, it basically has these small little teeth here. It's hard to see, but you need to get those teeth embedded in those two small little holes right there. And it's pretty hard to keep it there. Sometimes you can luck out and it'll just kind of stay there. It looks like that's not the case this time. So what we'll do is we will wait on that. We're just going to finish assembling the rest of what we got here. So we'll put this piece back in here, this gear, small gear. And again, this is typical design of pretty much all these level wind reels, to have those pieces like that, have that mesh like so. And we're going to hit this with a little bit of blue grease in there, as well as on the teeth in here. Don't need to get carried away with it, but we want, you know, just enough of it on there, have it work its way into all those teeth basically. And then I like to put a little bit on the clicker here as well, because that is a moving piece, like so. So now we're ready to put our ring back on. That seats quite nicely. So here we have our worm drive for the level line mechanism, and there's a pawl here. And what you want to do here is you want to take this out and you want to do a light inspection of this pawl and make sure that it's in good shape. It's just part of the service that you should do when you're going to the extent of taking all this apart, and just do a inspection on this and make sure that it's okay. And you can see those teeth right there, and that's the part that grabs in there. And it really doesn't look that bad actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to seat it back in. And what happens is normally when you take that out, you wind up moving the worm drive shaft one way or the other, and it doesn't quite line up. And so what you need to do is you need to kind of tweak it a little bit to the point where you can keep turning it down, and then that way you can get that lined up like that. And then once you have that more synced up, you should be able to turn it more. For some reason it's not quite jiving yet, but we'll get there. You'll know when it's right. You just have to keep working at it. You just kind of have to move it back and forth until you get in the groove that you need to be in. I think that's probably it there, I hope. We'll see here. There we go. So that's it right there. So again, I like to do some oil on this guy right here. I've seen other people use grease, nothing wrong with it. I like doing the oil because it's a little thinner, gets down in those grooves a little better, makes it a little smoother operation, I think, in general. But this is definitely, you know, adding to the mechanisms involved, you know, the whole level line series, you know, having all these additional components and parts, in opposed to a old school classic conventional style reel that doesn't have any of those parts. So the mechanisms definitely are different in that regard. So okay, so that's all ready to go. So now we're pretty much at the point where we're ready to start putting the spool back onto this side of the reel. I like to do my blue grease on both sides of the spool, like so, just a little bit. You don't have to get carried away, just enough. Put that into position there. We're going to put the spool in, like so. That looks good. I also, at this point, like to take a little bit of that oil and do a bead in these positions here, on all these threads, so that those are just ready to go. I just want to make sure and double check that I got all these old contaminants out from in the center of this plate right here. I can still see there's a little bit there in the center that I missed, and that happens. I think for the most part though, it's pretty good. Okay, so we're ready to slap this guy back on. And what we want to do here this is the part where we want to get this part in there, obviously. And we're going to wait on the actual worm drive itself. We're going to wait on that piece, but we want to get this shield in position. We want to get these screws lined up, of course. So again, you've got two shorter screws, or you should have two shorter screws. You may not necessarily. Looks like I've got this extra one here. And it looks like all four of these are about the same size. So we'll see here if we've got another one nearby I can use for that. Looks like that's probably a winner. It actually might be a little too short. I think that one will do it right there. So we're going to put that bead of oil on all these guys here. A little bit of a tedious one this time, but that happens. Just keep working the kinks out. Got to get it lined up though with that hole for sure. And it's just not working for me. Okay, we got that one, we got this one. Now we just need to get our shield back into place. Like so. Okay, let's try it one more time. Okay. All right, so we're going to continue doing the rest of our screws, of course, into these other positions here. I'm seeing this extra screw. I'm not 100% sure where that came from still. I'm not sure if that's just something that I had off the side somewhere and I just happened to put it in the tray or not, but we'll find out soon enough where it came from. I can definitely tell this reel has definitely spent some time out in the sun because it's very baked on the side plate, which is not an uncommon problem. But overall, I'd say its condition is really not that bad, and it's definitely fishable, definitely usable. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to back a couple of these back out here because we're having trouble lining up this frame post, unfortunately. Try to get that into position. That happens sometimes, and you just have to kind of work at it a little bit. Sometimes it's good just to kind of leave a few of those screws a little bit loosened up until you get everything kind of reassembled, just so that everything kind of balances out the way that it needs to. Okay. I'm just looking at both sides, make sure everything's good there. Okay, so now we should be in a good position to put our worm drive back in, and what I try to do is just take that bushing out, and then you should be able to put this piece in like so, like that, and line that up with your frame post there. We've already got this greased up, so that's good. We're gonna put that guy back in there like so. Okay, I think that'll do it. Okay, so now we'll put our bearing back in, hit that with a little bit of blue grease right there. We're going to stick that back in so that our spool can turn freely on that bearing. Okay. Now we're in a better position to tighten up our screws a little bit. I like to kind of go back and forth like so and get the balance out. Go the other side and double check that. Okay. Yeah, so that looks pretty good, I'd say. Really good free spool. Yeah, really good. Okay. So we're basically in the home stretch now. We put our collar back in place. And you can do a couple of different things here. You can do some oil. I find that a good trick is to use some lube or some grease right here because it's a little thicker, and just do a little bit there just to kind of help the thread. It's just a little thing to do. And we can put our star wheel back in place. Want to make sure that goes down as much as possible. This handle cleaned up really nice. Nice black handle. And also do a little bead of lube inside here. Just a little bit, not a lot. You don't want to all go oozing down into the drag kit. too much and it will. So just be mindful of that. We'll tighten this guy back up. And we'll do another little bead on this thread here, which I really like to do. Yeah, I'm going to say that that's just an extra screw that showed up somewhere. So we're not going to worry about that because I'm not seeing any missing ones in here at all. These little screws can be difficult sometimes. Like this one's happening to be right now. You have to have this nut lined up just right though. So just make sure you take your time with that. Otherwise it will not work correctly. I'll try that one more time. Okay, so we'll have a look here and see how this works for us. So that's spinning real nicely, real smooth, really nice. Really nice loud clicker, so that's a good deal there. We got great free spool, so that's looking great. And go back here, we'll try out our drag. We'll back it off a little bit and tighten it up a little bit more and a little more. A nice smooth HT100 kit. Yeah, it's great. So there you have it. That's the Penn 309 level wind, all serviced up and ready to go. So thanks for watching. This is Tony with Back on the Bench. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.